Hello everyone, thanks for joining and thanks for the massive response on this Python series and thanks for everyone who has been subscribed to this EDUeki Learning channel. And this is day one of this Python series. As you know, right, I'm starting with a Python series for an DevOps and AI engineers to get started with the Python, from the basic. Okay, and let me quickly go over with a couple of details here that this is the course tracker that I have planned to cover in this entire Python series, and today is the day one where I will go over with the basics of Python and the Python introduction stuff in terms of how do we install the Python binaries and IDE setup, the basics of data types and the HTTP request related concept. So I'm not going to jump onto the straight away to the practical Python coding sessions today because we need some kind of brainstorming to understand why and where do we use Python, what are the different use cases around it, especially considering the people who are completely new to this Python or maybe IT related apps, right? So this session gonna be help before we actually jump onto the Python coding related stuff, right? And also there is a question tracker sheet that I have rolled out asking you guys to fill up the questions that you have. I will be creating a separate video for all of these, and thanks for the massive response and whoever has filled this question tracker. I'll be I will be creating a new different videos for all of these, and I'll be marking the status as completed as well. Okay, and keep continue adding more questions to this tracker sheet, guys. Without further delay, let me get on to the session. Let me try to do the screen share here. Well, so let's talk about the Python data types, what it is mean, and where do we use these things, right? So I'm going to take a real-time retail-based application here to understand how it works in real time. This is the Walmart retail store, and most of you might be already know that, where you can go to the Walmart or any retail store, right? You can register an account and logging into your account and search for the the products that you wanted to purchase, then go for the billing pattern, right? So whenever you are registering an account in these retail stores apps, right, the request will be hit on the front end servers first. The front end servers are like a web servers which are basically helping or giving you the nice interface for you to action, right? And these front end web servers basically take the request whenever you hit submit after you filling up the registration form, and the details, the data that you have been filled in the registration form, right, the data has to be stored in the database somewhere, correct? Then only later when you try to logging into the same app, right, it will compare the credentials that you provided at the time of login versus the credentials that were generated at the time of registration time, correct? So for that it would need the credentials stored somewhere. So the database is the concept that we use here in order to store the data that were generated at the time of registration time, right? So later in the login time, it can do the comparison and see if the credentials are correct or not, right? If the correct, then you will get access to the portal. If not, you will be get denied, right? That is how you will be experiencing this as an end customer, correct? So when it comes to the backend technical, how it is working, right? These front-end web servers are actually passing the request, right, to the backend servers. These backend servers or the application servers are coded using Python or Java or any other programming language, but here we stick to the the Python, as our goal is to learn the or explore the Python related skills. right? Okay, so the backend server, that means the code that you have written for this specific business logic in the Python, right? That is running in one of the server. The front end is calling the backend, and that backend, right, will do that business functionality. In this case, let's say the code that you have written in Python will take care of taking the login credentials that the user has been submitted, and take the credentials that were stored already in the database, right, and do the comparison. If it is all matching, okay, the access is granted. So this is called as a business functionality, right? This business functionality will be handled at your app server. The front-end server or the web server that I talked about here, right, which is developed using AngularJS or Node.js or any other frameworks, right, that are supporting these, front-end graphical interface, right? There, the business functionality will not be executed completely, right? So they are just there to give you the nice interface, the animation or whatever it is, and the request will be sent to the backend application server. The app server is the one who will be taking care of executing the actual business use case and giving the response back to the clients, right? And in this case, the backend server will be connecting to the databases as well. And typically this is the 3-tier architecture, right? Because we have one tier which is the web server, one tier which is the app server, and one tier which is the database level, correct? And the app server is also referred here as a REST API, because the app server where your code is running, right, is running continuously and waiting for the client request. Whenever the client has sent a request to this app server, then it receive the request, execute the business logic, and give the response back, correct? So this type of behavior application, we are calling it as a REST API service. I'm not going in too much of technical terms here because I wanted to ensure that this is reached or understood for anyone, right? So that's the reason I'm going over with a kind of the general understanding format. Well, when the client is accessing this web application, right, the request by default will be sent right in a HTTP protocol format. In the sense, when the client, when I say client here, anyone who is initiating the request is the client. Let's say the browser is called as a client who is initiating the request to the server to get the web page. When the client is sending the request, right, the request should be understood by the app server in order to give the response, correct? So there should be some contract between the client and the server, right? So HTTP is the protocol format that the client and the server is agreed upon to understand the client request to give the responses back, right? So this hypertext protocol is the default protocol type for most of the browsers, right? So the request is sent using HTTP method, and the same request is received by your front-end web servers, and the same request will be passed on to the backend server, right? And when the client and of course this web server itself can call as a client, guys, because this web server is initiating a connection or initiating a request to the app server, right? So from app server perspective, the web server is also a client. From browser perspective, probably the front-end server is acting as a server only, but from app server perspective, the web server is a client, because the web server is actually making a request to the app servers, right? So when we talk about the client and the server now, right, the input that has been sent by the client will be received by the server, the code will be executed, right? And the response called as an output will be given to the clients. The input is called as a request, and the output, whatever is returned by this server, right, is called as an response, right? When the clients are sending a request to the server, right, in this case, let's say the user is trying to logging into the application, then user has entered a username, a password in the login form in the UI in the website, right? That username password will be now sent to the server, right? So the data that is being sent to the server can be in any type, in the sense, no, that data can be a integer, can be a string, can be a boolean, correct? That means when the client is making a request to the server by sending some input data, the data can be in any type, right? So this is called as a data type. What kind of the data that the client is sending to the server? Is it a integer? Is it a string? Is it a boolean? Right? Is it a floating number? Correct? So these are called as a primitive data types in Python. When I say primitive data types, the data can be of boolean, string, integer, or floating, right? These are called as a primitive data types. Why it is so important to know the data type? Because if it is a number, we will be handling this data in a different way. If it is an alphabetical string, probably we will be parsing, in a different way, correct? So it's very difficult. It's very important to know that what kind of the data that it is receiving. Obviously, right? If I give you a number, you will think that, okay, we need to do some mathematical operations. If we give a alphabetical a string, you think that maybe that is something related to the passes, correct? So the data type is important here to understand and process it. Okay, and the data that the client is sending to the server can be a list format, dictionaries, tuple, set. What are these? The tuple, dictionary, list, all this stuff are called as a data structures, right? And we'll talk about what is exactly the data type, what is a data structure, how do we understand that data using a Python, how do we parse it. We'll go over with all the details later, right? But for now, think of like this is a kind of a data types that are available in Python. Sometimes the client need not to send the data in this primitive data types or the data structures only, right? The client can send the data in a form of a CSV file or a JSON file or a XML file as well. If then the Python code that is running in the server should be capable enough to understand the data coming in which format, how do we understand the data, how to parse the data and execute the business logic and give the response back to the client. In this case, the app server will be giving the response to the client web server. The web server is passing the same to the browser client. That is how you will be seeing that responses on your browser, as an end customer. Good. Now, whatever the data that the client is sending, right, that whole data, we call it as a HTTP request body. The HTTP request body is the general term that we use because it can be any data, right? It can be a XML, JSON or any other, correct? So any data that the client is sending to the REST API, that is called as a request body, right? And one important thing here is, when the client is sending some data to the server, what to do with that? The server has to store that data into the database. The server has to search for the data in the database and delete it. the server has to take the data and also retrieve some relevant information from database and do something, correct? What needs to be done with the data? So that is defined using the HTTP request type. The HTTP request type can be a get, post, delete, patch, put. What are these? When the client is sending the request body, sending the request to the server, it also sends the type. Is it a get request or a post request? Get means, hey, I wanted to get some information from the server. Post means, hey, I'm sending some data, you take this data and you process it and do the business logic. Delete means, hey, I'm sending this data or I'm sending this request, right? So based on this request, could you please go and delete the data on the database, correct? So what needs to be done on the request is determined using the HTTP request type, right? And simply we call it as a CRUD operation, CRUD. Okay, and once the server has received this request and the corresponding request body as applicable, right, and the server will execute the business logic based on that, and the response will be given. Whatever the response that the server has been sent to the client, that is called as a HTTP response body, right? And here I wanted to talk about the stateless terminology. This means that when the client has sent some data to the server is executing the business logic and giving the response, but the application server is not storing any data related to this transaction in the server itself. Of course, if you want to store, yes, you can, but ideally the app servers will not store anything in it. The app servers are responsible for executing the business logic and give the response. If it has to store any data, that will be get stored in the databases, not on the app server itself. Hence called, this is a stateless service. If the server is storing any data, then we call it as a stateful behavior. If it is not storing any data, if it is not maintaining any state by itself, right, that is called as a stateless behavior. Good. Now you will know the reason why I explained this whole concept, right? Because now if the user has to logging into this retail application, right, you would need to write a Python code which will be retrieving this login information, get the data from database, compare it, give the access. During this process, you should know how to write a Python code to handle the different data type that it is receiving from the clients or from the request, right? So we'll get more about the data types, what is integer, what is a string, what is a boolean, what is a floating number, all this stuff in a next lecture. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I hope you got the minimal business context, how the apps are running and where exactly the the Python based application server is sitting in this whole 3-tier architecture, and few related technical terminologies, right? All right, team, I think considering the timeline, probably in the next lecture I'll talk about Python installation, IDE, and we'll get start with the data types related concepts too, right? And I'll update the course tracker accordingly what is discussed today. Probably these topics I will move to the tomorrow session. Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. That is all about today's session. If you have not subscribed to the EDUeki Learning channel yet, please do so. You will get a notification out on your mobile. Thank you very much. Please do a comment if you have any specific questions or you wanted to share your thoughts on this. Thanks a lot.